Moses stood before the 12 spies, his eyes locked on the men he had chosen to scout out the land of Canaan. According to the biblical account in Numbers 13, 1-2, these men, one from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, were tasked with gathering information about the land, its inhabitants, and its fortified cities. The year was approximately 1250 BCE, and the Israelites had been wandering in the wilderness for nearly 2 years. Joshua, from the tribe of Ephraim, and Caleb from the tribe of Judah, stood tall among the group, their faces set with determination. The other spies included Shammua, Shaphat, Igal, Palti, Gadiel, Gadi, Amiel, Sether, Nabi, and Guel. As Moses gave them their instructions, he reminded them of the promise God had made to the Israelites, to give them a land flowing with milk and honey. The spies set out on their mission, traveling north from the wilderness of Paran, a region in the northern part of the Sinai Peninsula. They moved swiftly, covering over 150 miles of rugged terrain, as they made their way towards the hill country of Judah. As they walked, the sound of their footsteps echoed off the rocky outcroppings, and the scent of acacia trees filled the air. Their journey would take them through the Negev desert, a region known for its harsh climate and limited resources. The spies were tasked with gathering information about the land's produce, including grapes, figs, and pomegranates, as well as the strength of the cities and the people who inhabited them. They were to return with a report, bringing back samples of the land's fruit and a detailed account of the inhabitants and their fortified cities. As they ventured deeper into Canaan, the spies encountered the Nephilim, a group of powerful giants who were said to inhabit the land. The Nephilim were a fearsome people, known for their strength and ferocity. The spies also saw the heavily fortified cities, with walls and towers that seemed impenetrable. They marveled at the abundance of the land, the clusters of grapes so large that they had to be carried on a pole between 2 men, as recorded in Numbers 13:23. The spies spent 40 days gathering information, and when they returned, they brought with them a mixed report. While they spoke of the land's bounty, they also spoke of the giants and the fortified cities, striking fear into the hearts of the Israelites. As the spies stood before Moses, their faces told the story of a land that was both promising and perilous. The journey had begun. The 12 spies, chosen from each of Israel's tribes, stood on the brink of Canaan, the land promised to their forefathers. Under the guidance of Moses, they prepared to scout the territory that lay ahead, a land flowing with milk and honey, as described in Exodus 3:8. With the sun climbing high, they set forth from the wilderness of Paran, hearts pounding with anticipation mixed with trepidation. As they ventured deeper into Canaan, the landscape unfolded before them like a rich tapestry. They moved through valleys alive with the vibrant colors of wildflowers and lush green pastures. The air was brimming with the scents of ripening fruits. Numbers 13:23 tells us they found a cluster of grapes so large that it required 2 men to carry it on a pole, a testament to the land's bounty. Alongside the grapes, figs and pomegranates adorned the trees, each a symbol of prosperity and abundance. The spies marveled at the fertility of the land, feeling the weight of its promise settle upon their shoulders. Yet, with each step, shadows loomed larger. As they traversed the fertile valleys, they encountered fortified cities, walls that towered like mountains, constructed of stone and mud bricks. The inhabitants of these cities were not merely farmers. They were warriors, skilled in the art of combat. Reports flooded their minds of the Nephilim, giants who walked the earth, descendants of the ancient. According to rabbinic tradition, these beings were fearsome, standing as tall as trees, with strength that seemed insurmountable. The spies could feel the weight of their presence, a palpable reminder of the danger that lay ahead. In the midst of their exploration, they came upon a city called Hebron, known for its ancient oaks. This city held a deep significance, being the burial site of the patriarch Abraham's family, a connection to their past that tugged at their hearts. They took note of its fortifications, realizing they would need more than faith to conquer such a place. As they traversed the land, they encountered the vestiges of the Nephilim, a skeletal remains of what appeared to be a giant long buried in the earth, a chilling sight that sent shivers down their spines. After 40 days of scouting, The spies gathered their findings. They had seen the beauty of the land, but also the terror it held. The fear of the giants gripped their hearts, and they whispered among themselves, recounting the immense size of the Nephilim. Shammua, from the tribe of Reuben, recalled, "We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and so we were in theirs." This sentiment echoed through their ranks, planting seeds of doubt in the very promise God had made to them. As they returned to the camp, laden with the fruits of the land, a sense of foreboding settled over them. The bounty they carried, grapes, figs, and pomegranates, was a reminder of what could be, yet the image of the giants haunted their steps. They approached Moses, their hearts heavy, aware of the weight of their report. The land was indeed fertile, but it was also filled with peril. Their mixed report began to take shape. The abundance of the land contrasted sharply with the threats they perceived. Caleb, ever the voice of faith, interjected, urging his companions to trust in God's promise. "We can take this land," he exclaimed, but the others shook their heads, the fear of the Nephilim overshadowing the memory of the promise. As they presented their findings to Moses, the atmosphere shifted. The glorious fruits, which should have inspired hope, became symbols of despair. Joshua and Caleb stood firm among the crowd, their spirits unyielding. They recognized that the giants were real, but so was the might of their God. "If the Lord is pleased with us," Joshua reminded the assembly, "he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey." But the others, gripped by fear, could not see beyond the shadows. They had witnessed the giants. They had felt the weight of the report hanging heavily over them. The promise felt distant, and the threat of the Nephilim loomed larger than their faith. In that moment, the seeds of doubt took root, leading them toward a crisis of faith that would change the course of their journey forever. The report was delivered, and with it, a choice lay before the people of Israel: faith or fear, trust or rebellion. Each decision echoed in the hearts of the spies, marking the beginning of a profound legacy of both promise and peril. The land was ripe for the taking, but the fear of the giants would soon lead to their own downfall. The 12 spies stood before Moses, their eyes reflecting a mix of elation and dread. After 40 days of traversing the rugged terrain of Canaan, they had returned, laden with the fruits of the land. Grapes the size of a man's head, figs and pomegranates filled their arms, evidence of the land's bounty promised by God. Yet, the joyous offerings were overshadowed by the weight of their words. "The land flows with milk and honey," Shammua, son of Zaccur from the tribe of Reuben, declared, his voice wavering. But the word hung heavy in the air, like a dark cloud gathering strength. "The inhabitants of the land are powerful, and their cities are fortified, reaching to the heavens." He gestured toward the crowd of Israelites, their faces clouded with worry. The mention of giants, the Nephilim, sent a ripple of fear through the assembly. Caleb, son of Jephunneh from the tribe of Judah, stepped forward, his voice steady and firm. "We should go up and take possession of the land," he urged, his spirit unyielded by the fearful report. "We can certainly do it." His conviction stood in stark contrast to the hesitance of his peers. The others hesitated, their hearts gripped by apprehension. "Not against such giants," Egal, son of Joseph from the tribe of Issachar, interjected. "We felt like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and so we were in theirs." His words, a reflection of their own insecurities, painted a vivid picture of their fears. The people, hearing the spies' accounts, began to murmur among themselves. The glow of the fruit in their hands dulled as despair settled in. Joshua, son of Nun, also from the tribe of Ephraim, stood beside Caleb, his expression unwavering. "The Lord is with us," he proclaimed, echoing the courage that surged within him. "Do not be afraid of the people of the land, for we will devour them." His words ignited a flicker of hope among some. Yet the weight of the majority's disbelief loomed large. The assembly erupted into chaos, voices rising in a cacophony of doubt and fear. "Would that we had died in Egypt, or in this wilderness," they cried. Their longing for the chains of Egypt, a life of slavery, cast a shadow over the promise of freedom and abundance. The echoes of their despair reached the heavens, a stark reminder of the struggle to trust in the unseen. Moses and Aaron fell face down before the assembly, their hearts heavy with the burden of disbelief. The sight of the people's fear pierced them. The promise of Canaan now seemed to slip through their fingers. The murmurs grew louder, fueled by the fears of the 10 spies who had seen the giants and fortifications. "Let us choose a leader and go back to Egypt," they clamored, a desperate cry for the familiar chains rather than the unknown freedom. In that moment, the land of Canaan, ripe with promise, became a symbol of unfulfilled potential. The Israelites stood on the edge of a monumental choice: to trust in God's promise or retreat into the familiar shadows of fear. The weight of the giants loomed large, but so too did the promise of a land flowing with milk and honey. As the sun began to set on that pivotal day, the people faced a crossroads. With every word spoken, they felt the reality of their fears solidify. The 10 spies painted a picture of despair, while Joshua and Caleb stood firm in faith. "The Lord will lead us," Caleb insisted, his voice rising above the tumult. "Do not rebel against him." But the fear had taken root, and the people struggled to grasp the faith being offered. The report of the 12 spies had ignited a crisis that would alter the course of their journey. The contrast between the unwavering faith of Joshua and Caleb and the overwhelming fear of the others crystallized the stakes. Would the Israelites step into the promise laid before them, or would they turn back, chained by their own doubts? In the ensuing silence, as the people wrestled with their fear, the thought of returning to Egypt became a sharp thorn in their minds. The fruits of the land lay forgotten in their hands, overshadowed by the giants that haunted their hearts. The promise of Canaan was slipping away, held hostage by fear. And in that moment, the future of an entire generation hung in the balance. The air was thick with discontent as the Israelites gathered at Kadesh, a stark encampment in the wilderness of Paran. It was the first month of the year 1445 BCE, and the echoes of the spies' return still reverberated among the people. They had seen the lush lands of Canaan, tasted the sweet grapes that required 2 men to carry, and yet the promises of God now seemed overshadowed by the terror of the giants they had encountered. The reports of the Nephilim, fierce and formidable, lingered in their minds like a dark cloud. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the camp, a wave of panic surged through the crowd. Caleb and Joshua stood firm, their voices rising above the tumult. "The land is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey." Numbers 14:7. But their words fell on deaf ears. Fear gripped the hearts of the people, and rebellion ignited like dry tinder. With a chorus of grievances, the Israelites cried out against Moses and Aaron. "Would that we had died in the land of Egypt," they lamented, their voices rising in a cacophony of despair. "Or would that we had died in this wilderness?" Numbers 14:2. Their longing for the familiar, even if it meant bondage, drowned out the promise of freedom and abundance. They were willing to forsake the land God had pledged to give them, a momentous act of defiance that would reverberate through history. As the uproar escalated, the people conspired, whispering of appointing a leader to take them back to Egypt. The thought of returning to the oppression of Pharaoh, to the bricks and the whips, was a bitter irony. Yet in their fear, they failed to see the truth. They were not merely rebelling against Moses, they were rebelling against the very promise of God. The consequence of their disobedience hung over them like a dark storm cloud, ready to unleash its fury. God's presence descended in a cloud above the tabernacle, and his voice boomed with righteous anger. "How long will this people despise me? And how long will they not believe in me, in spite of all the signs which I have performed among them?" Numbers 14:11. The weight of his words was palpable. He had delivered them from bondage, parted the Red Sea, and provided manna from heaven. Yet here they were, paralyzed by fear, unwilling to trust in his faithfulness. In that moment, the Lord decreed a harsh judgment. "As I live," he declared, "all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord. Because all those men who have seen my glory and the signs which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have put me to the test now these 10 times, and have not heeded my voice, they certainly shall not see the land of which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who rejected me see it." Numbers 14:21-23. The sentence was clear. The generation that had witnessed God's miracles would wander in the wilderness for 40 years, doomed to die without setting foot in the Promised Land. Only Caleb and Joshua, the two spies who had trusted in God's promise, would see the land. The weight of this punishment settled heavily upon them, a stark reminder of the cost of disbelief. As the news spread, the realization of their fate washed over the people like a wave. Their cries of rebellion turned to wails of despair. "We were wrong," they shouted, their voices filled with regret. "We will go up and fight." Numbers 14:40. But it was too late. The doors to the land of promise had closed, and their obstinacy had sealed their fate. That night, as they lay under the vast desert sky, the stars glittered like distant promises, yet the hearts of the Israelites remained heavy with fear and regret. The consequences of their rebellion loomed large. They would wander, not just through the desert, but through the wilderness of their own making, lost in a land that was meant to be their home. The sands of Kadesh, once a place of hope, now felt like a tomb for dreams unfulfilled. The people had chosen fear over faith, and the echoes of their rebellion would haunt them as they walked in circles year after year, waiting for a new generation to rise, one that would trust in the promise of their God. The cries of the Israelites echoed through the camp, a cacophony of fear and despair. They had just witnessed the reports of the 12 spies, a bitter mixture of promise and peril. As the tumult swelled, Moses found himself at a crossroads, the weight of his people's rebellion pressing heavily upon his shoulders. It was the first month of 1445 BCE, and the Israelites were encamped at Kadesh, poised on the brink of the Promised Land. Yet, they trembled in disbelief at the sight of the Nephilim, the giants who haunted their imaginations and fueled their rebellion against God's promise. Moses turned to God, his heart filled with anguish for the people who had seen miracles unfold before their eyes, yet remained shackled by fear. "O Lord," he pleaded, "the Egyptians will hear of it and say, 'Because the Lord was not able to bring this people into the land which he swore to give them, therefore he killed them in the wilderness.'" Numbers 14:13-16. His voice was steady, yet laced with desperation, a mediator standing between the Almighty and a restless people. He sought to avert divine wrath, to salvage the fragile faith of a nation teetering on the edge of destruction. In that moment, Moses invoked the very essence of God's character. "Pardon the iniquity of this people, I pray, according to the greatness of your mercy, just as you have forgiven this people, from Egypt even until now." Numbers 14:19. His words were an echo of grace, a reminder of the countless times God had been merciful to them, transforming their bitter sorrows into songs of deliverance. The Israelites had been slaves in Egypt, burdened by the whip of their captors, yet, time and again, God had shown them compassion, leading them through the Red Sea and providing manna from heaven. As Moses interceded, the ground beneath him felt as if it trembled in response to his earnest pleas. The Israelites had witnessed the plagues that befell Egypt, each a testament to God's power. Yet here they were, shunning the very land that flowed with milk and honey, the land promised to their ancestors. In their defiance, they threatened to collapse under the weight of their own disbelief. God's response came, powerful and immediate. "I have pardoned them according to your word," he said, revealing a glimpse of his boundless mercy. But he continued, "As truly as I live, all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord." Numbers 14:20-21. The gravity of his words was a reminder that while mercy was granted, consequences would still follow. The Israelites would wander for 40 years, their unfaithfulness sealing their fate. Only Joshua and Caleb, who had stood firm in faith, would be allowed to enter the land. Moses felt the enormity of this decree settle upon him. He understood the profound implications of their rebellion. A generation would fall in the wilderness, all for their unwillingness to trust. He had seen it in the eyes of his people, the flicker of hope extinguished by the shadows of fear. As he gazed across the camp, he saw the faces of men, women, and children, all yearning for the land promised to them, but paralyzed by dread. Yet amidst the despair, Moses clung to the promise of God. He knew that the story was not yet finished. The land awaited, and beyond the wilderness lay the fulfillment of covenant. His intercession was not merely a plea for forgiveness, it was a commitment to lead his people toward redemption, to remind them of the God who had brought them this far. As the sun dipped low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the camp, the Israelites began to quiet. The murmurs of dissent dwindled, replaced by hushed conversations of what lay ahead. Moses, still standing before God, felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. He had interceded for his people, not for their merit, but because of God's promise. In this moment, Moses became a reflection of divine mercy, embodying the role of a leader who stands in the gap for those who falter. He understood the importance of faith and the power of intercession. As the day faded into twilight, he turned back to the people, ready to share the message of God's mercy and the consequences that lay ahead. He knew they would need divine strength to face the years of wandering, and it would be through faith that they would ultimately find their way to the land flowing with milk and honey. The camp held its breath, waiting for the words of their leader, the one who had stood before Pharaoh and commanded the sea to part. Moses would remind them of their identity, of the God who had called them by name, and the promise that awaited them on the other side of their trials. The decree came swiftly. In the aftermath of their rebellion, God spoke to Moses, saying, "I have pardoned them according to your word, but truly, as I live, all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord. None of the men who have seen my glory and the signs that I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and yet have put me to the test these 10 times, and have not obeyed my voice, shall see the land that I swore to give to their fathers." Numbers 14:20-23. This moment marked the beginning of a grim and arduous journey through the wilderness, a punishment for disbelief that would last 40 long years. As the sun rose over the harsh terrain of the wilderness of Paran, the Israelites faced a relentless reality. The wilderness sprawled before them like a vast, unyielding desert. The heat was oppressive, often reaching upwards of 100 degrees during the day, while at night the temperature plunged, leaving them shivering in the cold. Water was scarce. The people would sometimes walk for miles before finding a bubbling spring or a trickling stream. Even the most basic comforts of life were stripped away, as the lushness of Canaan faded into memory, replaced by the biting grit of sand and the despair of unyielding rock. The death toll began to rise. As the years passed, the eldest among them succumbed to the harshness of their surroundings. The land of their forefathers had been promised as a place of milk and honey, but now their reality was a relentless cycle of survival. The graves of the fallen marked the harsh landscape, with the faithful Joshua and Caleb witnessing the toll of a generation lost to doubt. Each day, the people mourned for those who had fallen, and as the years rolled on, so too did the memories of the miracles they had witnessed in Egypt. By the time they reached the 7th year of wandering, the weight of their punishment had settled heavily on their hearts. The Israelites had witnessed God's provision in the form of manna, which appeared each morning like dew upon the ground, yet their hearts remained hardened. "Would that we had died in the land of Egypt," they lamented. "Or would that we had died in this wilderness," Numbers 14:2. Their complaints echoed through the camp, a chorus of despair that seemed unending. As the years dragged on, the stark realities of their punishment became a daily reminder of their rebellion. The Israelites faced hunger, thirst, and the constant threat of marauding bands of Amalekites and Midianites. In the autumn of 1440 BCE, when the leaves turned and the air cooled, Caleb, now an old man, stood before the assembly, urging them to hold fast to faith. Yet, his voice was often drowned out by the murmurs of doubt that filled the air. "Your children shall wander in the wilderness for 40 years and bear your faithlessness," God had declared, "until the last of your bodies lies in the wilderness." Numbers 14:33. And so it came to pass. The children of the rebellious parents grew up in the harshness of the wilderness, learning to survive in a land where every day was a battle against hunger and thirst. They would know the dry earth and the endless sky, but they would not know the lush fields of Canaan their parents had rejected. With each passing season, a new cycle of life emerged, yet the memory of the past haunted them. The Israelites would gather around the fire at night, sharing stories of the wonders of Egypt and the promises of Canaan, but the spectre of their refusal loomed large. Even the young, who had not witnessed the miracles, felt the burden of their parents' choices, as if the weight of the wilderness was etched into their very beings. In the 40th year, as the final moments of their punishment approached, the remnants of the old generation passed away. The last of those who had doubted was laid to rest, their bodies marking the landscape as a testament to the cost of disbelief. The Lord's anger was kindled against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness for 40 years, until all the generation that had done evil in the sight of the Lord was gone. Numbers 14:33. As the winds howled through the barren land, the Israelites remained resolute. They had learned, through suffering, the depth of faith required to trust in God's promises. With every step through the wilderness, they inched closer to a new beginning, preparing to inherit the land that flowed with milk and honey. The promise remained alive in their hearts, waiting for the day when they would finally cross the threshold into the land that had been promised to their forefathers. The cries of despair echoed through the camp, a cacophony of doubt that threatened to drown out the promise of the land flowing with milk and honey. Yet amidst the tumult, two voices rose above the clamour, Joshua son of Nun and Caleb son of Jephunneh. Their hearts burned with faith, a stark contrast to the fear that gripped the Israelites. In Numbers 14:6 we read that they tore their clothes in anguish, not out of despair, but in a desperate plea for the people to recognize the truth. "Do not rebel against the Lord," Joshua implored, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding him. "The land we explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey." Caleb echoed his sentiment, his eyes aflame with conviction. "We can certainly conquer it." But their words fell on deaf ears. The assembly, gripped by fear, murmured against them, their faith suffocated by the image of giants standing guard over the promised land. The Nephilim, descendants of the mighty, loomed large in their minds, overshadowing God's promise. The Israelites recalled the giants that haunted their dreams, forgetting the miracles that had led them thus far, the plagues of Egypt, the parting of the Red Sea, and the daily provision of manna in the wilderness. In that moment of rebellion, God spoke to Moses, revealing his fury. He threatened to strike the Israelites with a plague and disinherit them, declaring, "But because my servant Caleb has a different spirit and follows me wholeheartedly, I will bring him into the land he went to, and his descendants will inherit it." Numbers 14:24. The weight of this promise hung in the air, a beacon of hope amidst desolation. Caleb's unwavering trust in God's word set him apart. His resolve was not simply born of optimism. It was rooted in the history of his people, the God who had always delivered. Joshua, too, shared that steadfast faith, having witnessed the mighty acts of God firsthand. Together, they stood as pillars of belief against a tide of rebellion, embodying a spirit of hope that would not be extinguished. Days passed, and the bitterness of the rebellion lingered. The Israelites were condemned to wander the wilderness for 40 years, a harsh consequence for their lack of faith. Yet even as despair settled among the camp, God's promise to Joshua and Caleb remained unbroken. "You will experience the land you sought," God reaffirmed, a promise not just for them, but for their future generations. As the years unfolded, the older generation succumbed to the harsh realities of their choices, their bodies laid to rest in the wilderness, leaving only Joshua and Caleb to witness the unfolding of God's promise. The journey through the barren landscape was fraught with challenges, yet every step was a testament to their faith. They navigated the arid expanses of the Negev desert, where the sun beat down relentlessly and the nights were filled with the sounds of nocturnal creatures stirring in the dark. On the cusp of the Promised Land, Caleb approached Joshua, a man now seasoned by years of waiting, yet still filled with an unquenchable spirit. "Give me this mountain," he declared, referring to Hebron, a city marked by giants. "The Lord has promised it to me." At 85 years of age, Caleb's faith had not waned. He was ready to claim what was rightfully his, fortified by years of unwavering belief. His words echoed through the valleys as a testament to God's faithfulness. Joshua, filled with admiration for his faithful companion, granted his request. The land was theirs to conquer, a culmination of promises both seen and unseen. Together, they led their people into battle, armed not just with swords, but with the conviction that God would deliver them once more. They fought against the Anakites, the giants of Hebron, and emerged victorious, the land now a testament to their enduring faith. In the heart of Canaan, as Joshua and Caleb stood overlooking the lands they had long desired, the air was thick with the scent of promise fulfilled. This was not merely a victory over enemies, it was the realization of a hope that had endured through years of wandering and doubt. The legacy of their faith in God's promise would echo through generations, a reminder that belief in the unseen could bear fruit in the most astonishing ways. The Israelites, who once trembled at the thought of giants, now inhabited the very land they had feared, a land rich with abundance, echoing the promise given so long ago. Joshua and Caleb, the two faithful spies, became symbols of trust and perseverance, embodying a spirit that would inspire countless others in their journey of faith. Their story, marked by unwavering trust and unyielding courage, would resonate through time, an enduring reminder that even in the face of fear, faith can lead to the fulfillment of God's promises. As the dust settled from the tumultuous days of rebellion, the Israelites stood at the precipice of a sobering realization. In the wilderness of Paran, where their faith had faltered, a new lesson beckoned, a lesson on the dire consequences of disobedience and the necessity of trust in God. The words of Psalm 95 echoed through the camp, a haunting reminder. Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. The weight of this admonition pressed heavily upon them, piercing through the despair that had woven itself into their hearts. It was in the first month of 1445 BCE that the Israelites had tasted the bitterness of their rebellion. They had witnessed miracles, parting seas, manna from heaven, and water gushing from rocks. Yet when faced with the giants of Canaan, their faith crumbled. They had allowed fear to choke the promise of God. The consequence was not merely a delay in their journey, it was a generational condemnation. Numbers 14:29 records God's decree, "Your bodies will fall in this wilderness." The reality of their fate unfolded like a dark cloud above them, a stark contrast to the land flowing with milk and honey that lay just beyond their grasp. The elders gathered around Moses, their faces etched with regret and understanding. Caleb and Joshua, the two faithful spies, stood with them, embodying a spirit of unwavering belief. "We can take the land," Caleb had declared, with passionate conviction, yet their voices had been drowned in the clamour of doubt. Now they bore the burden of a community that had chosen fear over faith, and the weight of those choices pressed down on their shoulders like a heavy yoke. In the quiet moments of reflection, the Israelites began to recount their journey. They remembered the strength of the land, the lush valleys, and the towering clusters of grapes so large that 2 men needed to carry them. Yet, as they reminisced, the spectre of the Nephilim loomed larger, the giants of fear who had overshadowed their faith. The very thought of those formidable beings had clouded their vision, causing them to forget the God who had led them thus far. Their disobedience became a cautionary tale, one whispered among the families as they gathered around evening fires. The wilderness was unforgiving. Each day marked another step toward the inevitable, as the generation that had rebelled slowly diminished. The toll of disobedience was visible, not just in the loss of life, but in the fading hope of a people who had seen the glory of God, yet chose to turn back. As the years passed, their children grew strong, inheritors of a promise that remained unfulfilled. They were a new generation, born into the wilderness, with the lessons of their parents etched into their minds. In Hebrews 3:7-11, the words of warning resounded anew. "As I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest." The Israelites were learning a truth that would reverberate for generations. Faith is not merely an abstract concept. It demands action, a willingness to step into the unknown, to trust in the unseen. The gravity of their ancestors' choices settled in their hearts, becoming a driving force for the new generation. Among the campfires, the stories shifted. No longer were they tales of giants that instilled fear. Instead, they became narratives of trust, of stepping bravely into the land promised by God. As the children listened, they absorbed the gravity of obedience, the necessity of faith. They felt the weight of the past, but also the flicker of hope for the future. "We will not be like them," whispered a young man, his voice steady, a declaration of intent that echoed into the night. Additionally, archaeological studies of the region have unearthed remnants of ancient settlements, suggesting that the land the Israelites feared was indeed rich and bountiful. The fortified cities that had once seemed insurmountable now stood as mere relics of their former threat, remnants of a time when fear had reigned supreme. The land of Canaan was not just a geographical location, it was a promise awaiting fulfillment. As the sun dipped low on another day in the wilderness, the Israelites gathered to recount their history, their mistakes, and lessons learned. They spoke of the giants they had faced, both in the land and within themselves. Each story became a reminder of the cost of rebellion and the beauty of trust. The faith they would need to carry forward was not merely for themselves, but for their children and the generations that would follow. The lessons of the past settled upon them, not as a burden, but as a guiding light. They had come to understand that the journey through the wilderness was not merely a trial, but a preparation for what lay ahead. The land, with its cities and bounty, remained a promise, waiting for those willing to believe. And as the stars began to blanket the sky, the Israelites found a renewed sense of purpose. The wilderness had crafted them, and soon they would step forward into their inheritance, a land that would be theirs, if only they could embrace the faith that had once eluded their forebears. In the arid expanses of the Judean desert, the echoes of ancient footsteps linger. The site of Qumran, discovered in 1947, became a treasure trove of biblical history with the unearthing of the Dead Sea Scrolls. These scrolls, dated between 150 BCE and 70 CE, include some of the oldest known manuscripts of the Hebrew Bible. Among them, the Book of Isaiah stands out, a testament to the fidelity of the text over centuries. The scrolls reveal not only scriptural content, but also shed light on the beliefs and practices of the Jewish sect known as the Essenes, who inhabited Qumran during the time of the Second Temple. Archaeological evidence from Masada, the fortress where Jewish rebels made their last stand against Roman forces in 73 CE, also illuminates the context of Israel's tumultuous history. Excavations have revealed storied cisterns, ritual baths, and fortifications that speak to the resilience of the Jewish people. The historian Josephus documented the siege, noting that nearly 1,000 men, women, and children chose death over capture, a stark reminder of the dire choices faced by those who yearned for freedom. In Jerusalem, the remnants of the temple, destroyed in 70 CE, provide further grounding for the biblical narrative. The Western Wall, a remnant of the Second Temple, stands as a symbol of hope and continuity for Jewish people through centuries of diaspora. The temple's significance is echoed in the New Testament as well, where Jesus is depicted teaching within its walls, emphasizing the temple's role as a focal point of faith and community. The biblical account of the 12 spies resonates deeply when viewed through the lens of these archaeological discoveries. The narrative of Israel's journey to Canaan, laden with promise, yet marred by doubt, parallels the very real struggles experienced by the descendants of those who wandered the wilderness. The materials unearthed from these sites, such as pottery, tools, and inscriptions, reveal a society grappling with its identity amidst foreign domination and internal strife. As the Israelites stood at the threshold of Canaan, they were not merely facing giants, they were confronting their own fear and faith. The account in Numbers 13:33 references the Nephilim, described as giants, which stirred a profound dread among the spies and ultimately the people. This sentiment of fear is mirrored in the archaeological record, where the remains of fortified cities like Jericho, with walls that crumbled at the sound of trumpets, serve as a backdrop to the biblical conquest narrative. Moreover, the agricultural bounty reported by the spies, grapes so large they required 2 men to carry, suggests the fertility of the land that awaited them. Archaeological studies in the region have uncovered ancient agricultural practices, including the cultivation of olives, figs, and grains, corroborating the biblical depiction of a land flowing with milk and honey. This metaphor, although poetic, speaks to the reality of Canaan as a land of sustenance and abundance. In the context of faith and legacy, the story of the spies serves as a cautionary tale. The repercussions of the Israelites' disbelief led to a generation wandering for 40 years, a fate etched in the annals of history. Archaeological findings indicate that the population of ancient Israel fluctuated significantly during this period, with evidence of settlement patterns shifting in response to the socio-political landscape. The legacy of those who fell in the wilderness is palpable in the ruins that dot the landscape, silent witnesses to the choices made in fear. The tension between faith and doubt, hope and despair, is not merely a relic of the past. It reverberates through the ages, informing the beliefs and practices of contemporary faith communities. The Jewish tradition places immense value on the lessons gleaned from the spies' journey, emphasizing trust in divine promise. Similarly, Christian interpretations view this narrative as a prelude to the greater act of faith embodied in Jesus Christ, who invited followers to embrace belief over fear. As the listener contemplates the intertwining of faith and history, they may reflect on the archaeological layers that reveal the complexity of human experience. Each artifact holds a story. Each ruin whispers of lives lived with hope and fear. The dust of the desert, the stones of ancient walls, and the remnants of faith converge to tell a tale as timeless as the land itself. This legacy, rich with lessons, continues to challenge and inspire, calling forth a response to the question, how do we respond to the promises laid before us? 40 years after the fateful report of the 12 spies, the Israelites stood on the brink of the Promised Land. In 1405 BCE, as they camped in the plains of Moab, they were not the same people who had trembled at the giants of Canaan. This new generation, shaped by years of wandering and hardship, was ready to heed the lessons learned from their forebears, particularly the unwavering faith of Joshua and Caleb. Their story became a beacon of hope, demonstrating that trust in God could overcome even the greatest fears. Joshua, who had been a young spy, now stood resolute as Moses' successor. He was tasked with leading the Israelites across the Jordan River into Canaan. His faith was not merely personal, it was a collective legacy. Be strong and courageous, he urged the people, recalling the promises made by God. His words echoed the assurance found in Deuteronomy 31:6. The Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. The Israelites, having witnessed the perils of disbelief, clung to these words. Caleb too stood firm among them, his spirit undiminished by the years. As he surveyed the land of Canaan, now rich with promise, he recalled the first glimpse of its bounty. Clusters of grapes so large they required 2 men to carry. In Numbers 14:24, God had declared Caleb's faithfulness as the reason he would inherit the land. I wholly followed the Lord, he would say proudly, an echo of the conviction he had held onto during the long years in the wilderness. The land of Canaan was a tapestry of abundance, boasting cities fortified with high walls and fertile fields. Archaeological discoveries, such as the remains of ancient Jericho, reveal that these cities were indeed formidable, possessing defensive structures that spoke of their strength. Yet, unlike the fearful hearts that had once recoiled at the sight of giants, the new generation embodied a spirit of valor. They prepared to engage these challenges head-on, armed not only with swords, but with faith. As the Israelites prepared to cross the Jordan, they gathered to hear the words of the priests. The Ark of the Covenant, representing God's presence among them, was to lead the way. The moment was heavy with expectation. With each footfall on the banks of the river, the memories of the past lingered, the failure, the wandering, the lessons learned. The waters of the Jordan, swollen from spring rains, were a daunting barrier, but Joshua reassured them. As soon as the priests who carry the Ark of the Lord set foot in the Jordan, its waters will be cut off. This promise, rooted in faith, ignited a flame of courage among the people. When the priests stepped into the river, a miracle unfolded. The water parted, allowing the Israelites to walk across on dry ground. This miraculous crossing became an enduring symbol of faith, one that future generations would recount. Each stone they collected from the riverbed to create a memorial served as a testament to their trust in God's promise. In Joshua 4:24, it states, "He did this so that all the peoples of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful, and so that you might always fear the Lord your God." As they settled in Canaan, the legacies of Joshua and Caleb continued to reverberate through the tribes. Their stories were woven into the fabric of Israelite identity, influencing how future generations approached both faith and fear. In the book of Hebrews, the faith of these two men is immortalized in the Hall of Faith, Hebrews 11:32-34, where their trust in God amidst daunting odds serves as an enduring reminder. Indeed, the lessons learned from the 12 spies transcended time. The report of the giants and fortified cities transformed into tales of triumph and courage. The Israelites learned that the path to the Promised Land was not merely a physical journey, but a spiritual testament to the power of faith. They carried with them not just the memories of past failures, but the legacy of two men whose belief in God's promises paved the way for a nation to thrive. As the sun set over the hills of Canaan, the air filled with a sense of hope and purpose. The legacy of Joshua and Caleb ensured that future generations would remember the importance of faith and obedience. The echoes of their trust in God would not fade, but would inspire countless others to face their own giants with courage and conviction. As the sun dipped below the horizon and shadows stretched across the wilderness, the weight of the Israelites' journey settled heavily upon their hearts. After witnessing the consequences of their rebellion, they were left grappling with the reality of their choices. The words of the Lord, pronounced through Moses, rang clear with the gravity of divine justice. "If a man sin against his neighbor, then hear thou in heaven, and do, and judge thy servants." In this moment, the Israelites stood at a crossroads, not merely of location, but of faith and identity. In the wilderness of Paran, they were reminded of the land flowing with milk and honey that lay just beyond their reach, a promise now marred by doubt and fear. The report of the spies had unveiled the beauty of Canaan, but also the formidable giants that guarded it. These giants, the Nephilim, were not merely physical adversaries. They represented the internal struggles that every heart faced: fear, doubt, and the yearning for security over faith in the unseen. The consequences of their rebellion had become a stark reality, condemning them to wander for 40 years, a fate marked in the annals of history. As the Israelites reflected on their journey, they found solace in the steadfastness of Joshua and Caleb, two voices of faith amidst a chorus of despair. Numbers 14 verse 24 highlights Caleb's unwavering spirit. "But my servant Caleb, because he had another spirit with him, and hath followed me fully, him will I bring into the land whereinto he went, and his seed shall possess it." In this promise there was hope, an assurance that faith, when aligned with divine purpose, could transcend the failures of the past. The landscape of the wilderness was not merely a backdrop, it was a crucible for transformation. In the years that followed, the children of the rebellious generation would grow up amidst the trials of wandering, learning the value of faith through hardship. The sands beneath their feet whispered tales of resilience, shaping a new identity, forged by lessons learned in the face of adversity. In the quiet of reflection, they understood that the journey was not just about reaching a promised land, but about cultivating a deeper trust in God's unwavering promise. As the Israelites gathered, their hearts turned towards prayer, seeking strength for what lay ahead. They recalled the covenant made at Sinai, a reminder that their relationship with God was anchored in obedience and faithfulness. "Lord," they prayed, invoking the words of Moses, "let your judgment be just, condemning the wicked and justifying the righteous." They sought clarity, strength, and a renewed spirit to follow the path that lay before them. A path that required not only courage, but also a commitment to trust in the promises of their God. In this moment of collective supplication, the weight of the past began to lift, replaced by a glimmer of hope as they envisioned their future, a future that beckoned them towards the land promised to their forefathers. As the night enveloped them and the stars twinkled overhead, they found peace in the knowledge that faith, however tested, could lead to redemption. And so, the echoes of their prayer filled the cool night air, a testament to their unwavering belief in the God who had called them forth. That brings us to the end of the 12 Spies of Israel. In this episode, we followed the journey of Moses and the 12 spies as they scouted the land of Canaan for 40 days. Key figures like Joshua and Caleb reported back to Moses with a mixed review. highlighting both the land's abundance, such as giant grapes, and the fear of powerful giants they encountered. Their experiences in the wilderness of Paran set the stage for the Israelites' Bastos' future in the Promised Land. Before we close, a prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for the real people and real moments you preserved so faithfully across thousands of years. Stories of faith, of failure, and of your grace that never gives up on us. Wherever this listener is right now, at the start of their day, during a quiet moment, or at the close of the night, may what they heard today take root deep in their heart. May it encourage them, challenge them, and remind them that the same God who moved in these ancient stories is still moving today. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for spending this time with us. If this story meant something to you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. New stories released every week on the Shepherd's Lantern. God bless you. We'll see you in the next one.